Hey guys, Brockshot here. Back with you with the next video in our series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. At last, we came to the door of a room and she said, "Go in." I answered, more in shyness than politeness, "After you, miss." To this she returned, "Don't be ridiculous, boy. I am not going in," and scornfully walked away, and, what was worse, took the candle with her. This was very uncomfortable, and I was half afraid. However, the only thing to be done was to knock, being to knock at the door. I knocked, and was told from within to enter. I entered, therefore, and found myself in a pretty large room, well lighted with wax candles. No glimpse of daylight was to be seen in it. It was a dressing room, as I supposed from the furniture, though much of it was of forms and uses then quite unknown to me. But prominent in it was a draped table, with a gilded looking glass, and I that made out at first sight to be a fine lady's dressing table. Whether I should have made out of this object so soon, if there had been no fine lady sitting at it, I cannot say. In an armchair, with an elbow resting on the table, and her head leaning on that hand, sat the strangest lady I have ever seen or shall ever see. She was dressed in rich materials, satins and lace and silks, all of white. Her shoes were white, and she had a long white veil dependent from her hair, and she had bridal flowers in her hair, but her hair was white. Some bright jewels sparkled on her neck and on her hands, and some other jewels lay sparkling on the table. Dresses, less splendid than the dress she wore, and half-packed trunks, were scattered about. She had not quite finished dressing, for she had but one shoe on. The other was on the table near her hand. Her veil was but half arranged. Her watch and chain were not put on, and some lace for her bosom lay with those trinkets, and with her handkerchief, and gloves, and some flowers, and a prayer book, all confusedly heaped about the looking glass. It was not in the first few moments that I saw all these things, though I saw more of them in the first moments than might be supposed. But I saw that everything within my view which ought to be white had been white long ago and had lost its luster, and was faded and yellow. I saw that the bride within the bridal dress had withered like the dress, and like the flowers, and had no brightness left, but the brightness of her sunken eyes. I saw that the dress had been put upon by the rounded figure of a young woman, and that the figure upon which it now hung loose had shrunk to skin and bone. Once I had been taken to see some ghastly waxwork at the fair, representing I know not what impossible personage lying in state. Once I had been taken to one of our old marsh churches to see a skeleton in the ashes of a rich dress that had been dug out of a vault under the church pavement. Now waxwork and skeleton seemed to have dark eyes that moved and looked at me. I should have cried out if I could. "Who is it?" said the lady at the table. "Pip, ma'am." "Pip?" "Mr. Pumblechook's boy, ma'am. Come to play." "Come nearer. Let me look at you. Come close." It was when I stood before her, avoiding her eyes, that I took note of the surrounding objects in detail, and saw that her watch had stopped at 20 minutes to 9, and that a clock in the room had stopped at 20 minutes to 9. "Look at me," said Miss Havisham. "You're not afraid of a woman who has never seen the sun since you were born." I regret to state that I was not afraid of telling the enormous lie comprehended in the answer. "No. Do you know what I touch here?" she said, laying her hands, one upon the other, on her left side. "Yes, ma'am." It made me think of the young man. "What do I touch?" "Your heart?" "Broken." She uttered the word with an eager look and with a strong emphasis and with a weird smile that had a kind of boast in it. Afterwards, she kept her hands there for a little while and slowly took them away as if they were heavy. "I'm tired," said Miss Havisham. "I want diversion, and I have done with men and women. Play." I think it will be conceded by my most disputatious reader that she could hardly have directed an unfortunate boy to do anything in the wide world more difficult to be done under the circumstances. "I sometimes have sick fancies," she went on, "and I have a sick fancy that I want to see some play. There, there," with an impatient movement of the fingers of her right hand. "Play, play, play." For a moment, with the fear of my sisters working me before my eyes, I had a desperate idea of starting round the room in the assumed character of Mr. Pumblechook's chaise cart. But I felt myself so unequal to the performance that I gave it up, and stood looking at Miss Havisham in what I suppose she took for a dogged manner, inasmuch as she said, when we had taken a good look at each other, "Are you sullen and obstinate?" "No, ma'am. I'm very sorry for you, and very sorry I can't play just now. If you complain of me, I shall get into trouble with my sister. So I would do it if I could, but it's so new here, and so strange, and so fine, and melancholy." I stopped, fearing I might say too much, or had already said it, and we took another look at each other. Before she spoke again, she turned her eyes from me and looked at the dress she wore, and at the dressing table, and finally at herself in the looking-glass. "So new to him," she muttered. "So old to me, so strange to him, so familiar to me, so melancholy to both of us. Call Estella." As she was still looking at the reflection of herself, I thought she was still talking to herself and kept quiet. "Call Estella," she repeated, flashing a look at me. "You can do that. Call Estella at the door." To stand in the dark, a mysterious passage of an unknown house, bawling Estella to a scornful young lady, neither visible nor responsive, and feeling it a dreadful liberty so to roar out her name, was almost as bad as playing to order. But she answered at last, and her light came along the dark passage like a star. Miss Havisham beckoned her to come close, and took up a jewel from her table, and tried its effect upon her fair young bosom and against her pretty brown hair. "Your own one day, my dear, and you will use it well. Let me see you play cards with this boy." "With this boy? Why, he is a common laboring boy." I thought I heard Miss Havisham's answer, only it seemed so unlikely. "Well, you can break his heart." "What do you play, boy?" asked Estella of myself with the greatest disdain. "Nothing but beggar, my neighbor, miss." "Beggar him," said Miss Havisham to Estella. So we sat down to cards. It was then I began to understand that everything in the room had stopped, like the watch and the clock, a long time ago. I noticed that Miss Havisham put down the jewel exactly on the spot from which she had taken it up. As Estella dealt the cards, I glanced at the dressing table again, and saw that the shoe upon it, once white, now yellow, had never been worn. I glanced down at the foot from which the shoe was absent, and saw the silk stocking on it, once white, now yellow, had been trodden ragged. Without this arrest of everything, This standing still of all the pale, decayed objects, not even the withered bridal dress on the collapsed from, could have looked like grave clothes, or the long veil so like a shroud. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.